Has someone asked you to knit something for them? Or do you consider knitting a lovely little garment for somebody's birthday, wedding, or maybe it's a baby shower? What sounds like a simple proposition can quickly lead to tears on both sides. And I'm not even talking about the infamous boyfriend sweater curse. So let's share my pearls of wisdom from almost 4 decades of knitting with you. First of all, we need to talk about yarn. If it's a gift, I'd stick to fibers that are easy to care for and not cashmere, indie dyed, sheep wool, single ply colorways, mohair, or basically anything where the label says hand wash only, lay flat to dry. Yes, you can, or rather you should add the washing instructions to the gift. On Etsy you can buy these special washing instruction tags you can sew in. Always a very smart idea. But let's be real here. If the recipient is a non-knitter, as they typically are, they typically don't want to hand wash that dainty, delicate, fretted fringe of mermaid lace made from speckled unicorn yarn. Certified organic cotton, superwash sheep wool yarn and acrylic are all fibers that make durable gifts. And if it's for babies or elderly people, then I would actually say stick to organic cotton, because that is the only fiber that you can easily wash at high temperatures, put in the dryer. It's super soft, it wicks away moisture, it's mostly hypoallergenic. And if it's certified, you can be sure that there are no harmful chemicals inside. That's always important if you gift something to a baby, of course. On top of that, I would definitely stay away from expensive yarns, especially if it's the very first time you gift that person something knitted. The chances that your precious cashmere yarn ends up as one big block of felt are just too high. If you want to add value, then do it through your knitting. Cables and color work can be a great choice. Also, please consider staying away from difficult colors. So indie dyed reds or over-dyed yarns are notorious for bleeding out, and if you take a look at plant-dyed yarn, this can easily bleach out if it stays in the sun for too long. So when in doubt, I would personally lean more towards industrial yarns, where the colors are a little bit more stable and a lot more reliable when it comes to washing. You might also want to stay away from rustic sheep wool, such as this brushed single origin yarn from the Faroe Islands. It's a lovely quality, but it's also itchy, and I know plenty of sensitive people who absolutely hate that, even if they wear a t-shirt underneath. Setting the yarn choices aside, I would almost always involve the recipient in one way or another if it is a larger project or a garment. You don't only need their measurements, you also need to know their preferences. So the wrong color could mean they never wear it, and if they are allergic to sheep wool, the same applies. And that's just 2 examples. If for whatever reason that is not possible, or you feel that would spoil the surprise, pick something small, something unisex, and something where the 100% correct measurements don't matter. A very good example are hats or headbands. So head sizes are remarkably uniform. The average difference between a size S and a size XL are barely 2 inches or 5 centimeters. So if you knit them a hat in ribbing, just like this one here, and you pick a pattern that you can wear a little bit more on the slouchier side, then if it ends up being the wrong color or a hard miss altogether, then you can still easily pass this on to someone else who will appreciate your effort. And then, after that first small little gift, you can see how they react. And if the reaction is positive, you can actually ask some follow-up questions right away. Things like, I wasn't sure about the color, or does it fit well, or maybe something like, hey, would you mind if I take down your measurements? Maybe, just very maybe, Santa has something else in store for you next Christmas. And if they are hesitant rather than ecstatic, that too is important information you can file away. And this brings me directly to the perhaps most important topic here: how to decide who is knitworthy and who is not. And the harsh truth is, there are no real ways to predict that other than trial and error. However, this leads me to another important fact. A gift is unconditional. This differentiates it from an investment. If I invest in a business, I want to know what they do with my money or whatever I gave them. A gift, on the other hand, comes from a place of love, where you feel they or their actions deserve to be recognized. But as soon as it leaves your hands, it is out of your control. If you cannot detach yourself from your knitted items in such a way, then I strongly urge you to reconsider knitting gifts. Naturally, there's also going to be some emotional investment, and that too is part of the deal. In a certain way and seen from a certain perspective, gifting is also a little bit selfish. It makes you feel better. So here are a couple of tips to avoid resentment. First of all, I already mentioned to start small and to involve the recipient. Otherwise, you will build up huge expectations on your side, consciously or subconsciously. Across 30, 40, 50 hours of knitting that sweater, you put all your love into each and every little single stitch. And on the recipient side, there's nothing. They possibly don't even know this is happening. And this already leads to an imbalance that is very difficult to overcome if you do not involve them right from the start. Instead, you could put together a fun little box such as this one here. Put the pattern inside, and then you can show them a picture and say, okay, this is what I wanted to knit for you. This is how it's going to look. This here is the yarn I picked. Do you like the color? Touch it. Take a look at the label. This is how you will need to care for it. And then you can turn all this into a mutual bonding experience where they can follow along, each step and see how much work this is, but also influence it. You can measure them, and then it will be almost like a bespoke experience. On top of that, I would always pay attention to these small little clues you can glean from everyday encounters. Some people will frequently compliment you for your knitted garments, and others never even notice. Some people quite apparently handle all their garments with great care, and others don't. Some people basically discard their entire wardrobe at the end of each season, and others build a wardrobe of timeless classics. Some people value handcrafted items and others don't. And if you've ever visited their home, this should be quite apparent. For example, I haven't seen my father wearing a single sweater in the past 20 years. So why would I knit him one? You can also try to find out what kind of gifter they are. For example, I am someone who spends a lot of time trying to find what I feel is the perfect gift for them. I paint my own cards, and then I will use my fountain pen and special ink to handwrite a personalized and meaningful text. But there are tons of people, cultures even, that approach gifting in a much more transactional way. For them, an envelope with cash or a voucher is a perfectly acceptable gift, maybe even preferred, and that too can be a clue. What also often happens is that people casually ask you to knit a sweater for them, and maybe they even go as far as, yeah, well, cashmere is really the only thing I can bear on my skin, and then they show you a sweater from the Dior Haute Couture runway asking you, can you knit that for me? Now, you could waste your time feeling offended or trying to educate them that it would take you 200 hours to knit that and the materials would cost 400 US dollars. But maybe you just decline in a friendly way. As I said, a gift is not an investment and it is not a transaction. A gift cannot be requested either. You can always say no, and if someone feels offended by that, the chances are high they were not knit-worthy to begin with. At the same time, this example, can you knit this for me, brings me to a somewhat uncomfortable question you need to ask yourself. Am I good enough to knit something the recipient will appreciate or not? Not everyone appreciates the unique organic qualities of hand knitting, and not everyone is a master knitter with perfect stitch definition either. And sometimes it's also more a you really want to knit something for them rather than them really wanting something knitted. Now, please don't be too harsh on yourself, but please don't shy away from a little self-honesty either. You know, a small tear now is not as bad as crying your heart out later on after spending 50 hours on knitting that sweater. Ultimately, you will never know without trying, and that is why I said start small, involve the recipient, and use a yarn that is easy to care for and maybe not all that expensive either. Minimize what can go wrong, and if it goes slightly wrong, then there is no big drama. Anyway, those were my thoughts on this whole topic of gifting knitwear. Please comment below if you have any personal experiences or tips you would like to add. And of course, if you have a similar question, then don't shy away from commenting as well. And as always, happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.